Coming up on today's Locked On Bucks, we recap a big win in Dallas against the shorthanded Mavericks. Take a look ahead to this March schedule for the Bucks and some lingering questions and updates on the Bucks active roster. We get into all of that after this on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
And welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. We thank you for making this your first listen every day and checking out the Locked On Bucks newsletter. If you have not done so yet, still time to sign up for free at lockedondaily.com and get your day started with the all-new free Locked On Bucks newsletter. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. A big weekend that we recap here, Camille. The Bucks head to Dallas. They take down, big was not the operative for the Mavericks, who were down basically every big man available in an awkward situation too, where Moses Brown was their starting center. He was on the final day of his 10-day contract. Financially, the Mavs can't give him a second 10 days. So he walked into a spot knowing this is it for me. Maybe down the road, I latch on with the Mavs on another 10-day. But for now, this is it. And after a bit of a sluggish start, you saw the Bucks say, okay, there's nobody in terms of bigs here. No Anthony Davis. No Derek Lively, no Daniel Gafford. Let's start to take advantage of this.
And they eventually did. Early on in that game, what surprised me the most was just how easy the Mavs were able to get to the paint themselves, get those paint touches, and really put up
20 points in the paint in the first quarter.
Yeah, that's far, far too many. So in this game, that surprised me off top. And then, as you mentioned, it's kind of like a slow start for the Bucks. And then as they started to get rolling, it was really fun to watch, especially in that second quarter run that they had where it was Giannis, Dame, and Brook who really kind of carried the way. After we saw the Kuz plus bench lineup kind of end the first quarter, start the second quarter, they got the game to within 3, but then it started to unravel pretty quickly. I believe when Giannis and crew re-entered the game, it was like a 9 or 10 point game at that point. And then the Bucks went on a run themselves to close out that second quarter strong. And really from there, they did not look back at the Mavericks at all. And I was encouraged, even though the Mavericks are shorthanded, really encouraged by that third quarter that the Bucks had, holding them like 16 points and just being able to close them out, because in the fourth quarter, the Mavs tried to make a run, but the Bucks were able to find answers down the stretch.
Yeah, it was 20-12 advantage Mavericks, points in the paint in the opening quarter, and then the Bucks gave up 22 in the next 2 quarters. And really that was the story, not the points in the paint per se, but the second and third quarter overall and what the Bucks did there, outscoring Dallas 70-43 after. So we can talk about the fourth quarter and the Mavs not really getting back in the game, but at least having you be on notice and raise an eyebrow of, okay, it's still a couple of possessions away from being over here. I mean, I attribute it to the Bucks just kind of taking the foot off the gas pedal, looking ahead to 2 days off and knowing the challenge of the schedule in front of them. So those middle 2 quarters, exactly what you wanted to see from the Bucks. And there was one very interesting sequence that came, in the early second, I think it was late first, early second quarter, that everybody has seen on social media by now, when Giannis took the clipboard from Doc Rivers and saw what Jason Kidd, known to do this when he was the head coach of the Bucks, not necessarily triple team guys, but unorthodox and aggressive defensive approaches. And that was the Maverick strategy of, let's throw 3 bodies at Giannis since we have no bigs. And at first you could tell the Bucks were kind of clunky around it. And that's when Giannis grabbed the clipboard and said, look, Brook, get to the dunker spot. Let's make sure somebody's one pass away. And I think the Mavs tried it 3 or 4 times after that, and they were killed every single time.
Yeah, and it helped too that Giannis was really quick with his decision-making when they did bring that pressure to him. The Mavericks, they were doing their best to keep Giannis uncomfortable, to keep Dame uncomfortable, because even the minutes when it was Dame on the court with no Giannis, I think it was in the second quarter as well, where I noticed it, like they are blitzing and trying to trap Dame before he even crosses half court. They are doing whatever they can to try to keep the ball out of the stars of the Bucks' hands. And the Bucks were able to find a way, to your point of it being a little clunky at first, but as they got used to seeing those looks, they found something that worked and kept running it. Like after the game when Doc Rivers said, I've been trying to get these guys to understand, if you find a set that works, keep running it over and over until the other team forces you to do something different. And I have flashbacks to being a kid and like playing my Uncle Tony in Madden, and he would run the same play the entire game. And I'm like, please do something different. And he's like, why, if you can't stop this one? So to see the Bucks kind of take that under their wings as well, of just like, we're going to keep running this until it doesn't work anymore, and finding success, I think that says something, as well as just down the stretch of Giannis and Dame understanding more of like, hey, last 5 minutes, this is our time now. Like we have to make something shake, and seeing the two of them continue to develop their chemistry and figuring that out, really, really encouraging going forward for this team.
Yeah, Giannis started, I think, 1 of 4 and finished 9 of 14. First quarter is 1 of 4 from the floor. So, I mean, you do the math, 8 of 10 the rest of the way. And I believe all of those baskets came in the paint. He was 11 of 13 at the free throw line, too. And, you know, it was just one of those things where I'm sure a lot of Bucks fans looked at it and thought, no AD, no Daniel, all the names that we just went through. And Giannis is really going to feast here. But to me, you know, he quietly 29 points. This was more impressive than like a 45-point Giannis outburst, because of what you mentioned in the patience, and Giannis just kind of playing within the flow of the game and kind of surveying, here's what the Mavs are showing me, here's what I'm going to do. And, you know, to me, those things are what's most important for this team as they continue to move forward and get ready for the playoffs.
Truly. And with that, you're seeing the other teammates step up in these moments of like, hey, we're being left open, knocking down shots. We had 6 Bucks in double figures in this game as well, which is like the 5th time already since the trade
since the All-Star break, or trade deadline.
And they only had like 7 total games like that prior to the trade deadline. And you already have 5 with this current group. Like the way that they're able to spread the ball, to see different guys stepping up, like Gary Trent Jr., we've talked about how important he is going to be for this team going forward because of his ability to create his own shots. Like he started the game off super hot, cooled down as the game went on. But like, I'm not mad at Gary Trent Jr. putting up 16 shots as somebody who's going to be leading the bench unit, and just seeing guys be able to respond and hit timely shots, still figuring out some chemistry and figuring out some like where guys are going to be at on the court. But just seeing guys step up, Kyle Kuzma coming through with 10 points on 10 shots, not the most effective night, but again, he also was rebounding the ball. He was playing some solid defense. You had Brook Lopez come through with 13 points. You had Kevin Porter Jr. with 11 points, in addition to Dame and Giannis doing what they do, and Gary Trent Jr., as we mentioned. So seeing the other guys also step up along the way of just making an impact in these situations where teams are trying to take Giannis out of the play or take Dame out of it. These guys have to step up, and they've been answering the call so far.
Yeah, I do want to kind of shift to, I mentioned this is one of the important things for this team getting ready for the playoffs, but all those names that you mentioned, the multiple double-digit scores, 6 of them once again that they've had, and just how this team is kind of reshaped. We've spent a lot of time talking about athleticism and defense and what that's meant since the trade, but just overall how this group is different and why I think it is better. Like, I don't want to keep getting into the Chris Middleton comparison and conversation, but I do think they're in a better place. And it's not just because Chris Middleton's gone, or it's not because Chris Middleton's gone, I should say. It's just because of the way that how this team plays and the shift that they've leaned into, what that means, and why I think it's what we're starting to see around the league as well. We'll get into that conversation and take a look ahead at this March schedule. Couple of breaks that the Bucks are going to catch here in the interim. So can they start to take advantage and piece together a solid record in this month? A challenging month with 16 games and a lot of tough opponents, but a couple of breaks early for the Bucks. We'll get into that coming up after this. Time now to talk to you about our friends over at FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on that than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. You'll love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether you're backing your team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, you'll never feel like you missed your chance. And plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So this shift that we mentioned before, watching that Mavs game and really watching the Bucks of late, we talked about, hey, Giannis and Damian Lillard, that partnership is in a much better place than it was last year, but it's pretty clear it's continuing to grow, and they're continuing to optimize that. And the trade that the Bucks made, while there are still questions about your half-court offense and who's going to be that consistent third scorer, I do think there's a lot of importance in having that movement, something that Doc Rivers has talked about quite a bit. When our offense fails in the fourth quarter, and it has quite a bit, it's because there's no movement, and we just kind of get bogged down and get into ISO ball. That's going to be important for this reshaped roster of just having guys like Kyle Kuzma that are going to get paint touches, and hopefully we start to see that offense change. But I just keep going back to it's harder and harder in this league to win when you're a top-heavy roster. We've talked about that for years. It's especially the case now with this new CBA, and that's where the Bucks were. There's a lot of trust in Chris Middleton in the playoffs, especially what we saw from him last year, what he did in that run to the championship. But Chris himself said, I need more time. And you don't know that was going to be there. So I think this is the acknowledgement by the Bucks of we put ourselves in a great spot in terms of our financial flexibility starting this summer. We still have Giannis and Damian Lillard. We're going to continue to develop that and build around those guys, and the shooting that we've surrounded them with, we feel like we've really got something here. And I think that's what you're starting to see. Again, we need to see the fourth quarter offense move forward, especially in the clutch. But I think the Bucks are 10th in defense, 12th in offense after that game against the Mavs, that they're starting to move into that mix of top 10 in both of those categories.
Which we've been saying from the start is the goal. You want to try to be top 10 in both categories if you really want to have a legit shot at competing for a championship. Now, I know that sounds like way too simple to break down basketball of hey, if you do these two things and these two things only, you got a chance. But if you just look at past champions, that's one of the things you can see they've had in common. Even that Nuggets team that won a couple of years ago, on the whole of the season, no, their defensive rating wasn't super high, but was it after All-Star break where they started to really roll defensively, and you saw that carry over into the playoffs. So it's important to be playing well on both sides of the ball. And for this Bucks team, when they did make the trade, outside of the just emotion of dang, we have lost a franchise legend in Chris Middleton and all the emotions that comes with that. At the time, I was at worst for the Bucks, this is a lateral move. At worst, this doesn't make them considerably worse, not considerably better. But as we continue to see them play, this might be a move where you look at it in another month and you're this is what they needed to do for this group, for this season, for this next era of Bucks basketball, because they are starting to figure some things out, and it's looking just like the chemistry is developing, guys are understanding their role and that they're really stepping up into it and looking to be a star in their role. And with this game here, with the Bucks dropping 132 on the Mavericks, yes, we know they were shorthanded in their front court, but still 132 points for an offense that we've talked about has struggled at times. And this is the third time in the last 4 games where they've scored at least 120 points. So seeing the Bucks offense come along while that defense, which has been surprisingly good throughout the season, continues to tighten up, continues to get better. Just seeing the communication, even when they're switching, just how clean that's starting to look for these guys when on the court. It's really encouraging, especially with this upcoming schedule that they have, which if you look back to last year and how they came out of break, they had a hot start out of the All-Star break last year as well. They went 6-0 out of All-Star break last year, but then they finished the season 8-12. including that embarrassing 4-game losing streak they had to like the Wizards and the Grizzlies and the Raptors and then the Knicks, but those last 3 games being at home. So I know for like this group and seeing what they can do now, because now they're 5-1 out of All-Star break this season. And as we mentioned, what they have in front of them is going to be a challenge, but I'm really excited to see how they respond to this, because what I've been wanting to see from this Bucks team is just more consistency. Can you consistently play good ball? Can you avoid those stretches where you have a week and a half of just losing or looking lost or outmatched? So I'm really excited for what's upcoming for them, even though it's going to be difficult. I think that's what they need to continue to get ready for this playoff run.
Yeah, they won 6 in a row out of the break last year, and some pretty quality wins too. When you look at who they beat, I mean, they beat Philly, they beat the Clippers, they beat the Timberwolves, they beat the Clippers in that game where it was just Dame and Damian Lillard made some big plays down the stretch. But yeah, once you got into April was when it was like you were feeling good about everything. The Giannis injury, obviously, notwithstanding there, but once you got into April, you were really starting to feel good, and then it just kind of saw the wheels fall off. That loss that you referenced to the Wizards, the Grizzlies too, with a loss to that team, shorthanded once again. You lost to the Raptors. You lost a tough one to the Knicks. I think that was the only game the Bucks lost to the Knicks last year. A much different story this year, and then the Giannis injury occurs, and there was no coming back from that. So you look at what they did in the month of April. It's a different story this year. With that April schedule is where it starts to lighten up a bit for the Bucks. But 2-6, I think they went in April, that you really limped into the playoffs. And again, it's be careful here, because we just referenced the 6-game win streak coming out of the break a season ago, but it feels much different so far here, the way it looks on both ends of the floor. And the Bucks tied with 3 other teams for, granted, a small sample size, but for the most wins since the All-Star break. The Cavs keep on rolling. They're 5-0. Pistons are 5-1. Lakers are 5-1. The Bucks are 5-1 since the All-Star break. And offense, kind of where it's been, 13th or 14th. Defense is the 4th best in the league since the All-Star break. And really, if you take it back to that game against the Timberwolves, too, I'd imagine those numbers are both even higher. So it's just a matter of like, let's keep this rolling. The big thing is obviously health. That needs to be on your side. But, the process, to borrow that terminology, it looks better. And Grant, I think our expectations are not where they were a year ago, because of how we've seen the last 2 years end with injuries in the postseason for the Bucks, and just the fact that Cleveland Cavaliers are really good. The Celtics are really good. The Knicks have had your number. I know I said recently, like, even if the Bucks finish 6th, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world if you're healthy to get that Knicks team. There's a lot of good teams in the Eastern Conference. It's a better conference, at least right now, heading into the playoffs than it was a season ago. And yet, I do oddly feel a lot better about the Bucks and their chances for a deep run, not necessarily winning the championship, but to make some noise in the playoffs this year than I did last.
In the offseason, we had a conversation centered around Dame and what does it look like for Dame to be Dame in Milwaukee? And it stood out to me because you were like, I don't have any numbers to attach to it. I just will know it when I see it. And to your point about watching this current edition of the Milwaukee Bucks and just saying, like, I feel a bit better about them going forward. I feel the exact same way. It's like my eyes are telling me, just watching this team play, like, they can go on a run this year if they continue playing well, continue playing good defense, continue unlocking the Giannis and Dame, continue being able to have role players step up. And it doesn't even need to be the same guys every single game, but you just need some guys every game to step up. And they seem to have a group that you can find 1 or 2 at least every single game to help out that starting unit. And this is all being done without Bobby Portis in the equation, which once we get to reintegrating him when he comes back from his suspension, going to be some interesting conversations about who falls out the rotation, what the minute load looks like. And honestly, even that's exciting to me because it feels like they just have more options to be able to throw out there in a playoff series of how you want to attack other teams. And if the teams are attacking you a certain way, I think you have more options to counter what you're seeing out there. So I'm really excited to see this team continue going forward because it just feels like they're understanding it. And also, it should go without saying that Giannis just looks really good. And this Bucks team, I said it before, as long as Giannis is on this Milwaukee Bucks team, they have a championship window. He by himself will hold the window open because he is just that talented. And when you see Dame starting to figure things out, being able to put together more consistent level of play this season, what we saw last year as well, the idea of the two of them and just how they're playing, that alone already has me like, hey, I'm ready to see what this looks like come playoff time, because Giannis is going to be the best player on the floor in any series in the Eastern Conference. So the Bucks have a really good shot as long as they can continue building on the good habits are starting to form now.
Yeah, Giannis is going to be the best player on the floor in any series in the East, and in some, you're going to have the second best player on the floor as well. So that's the big thing for this team. There is one other thing to point out about their fourth quarter offense and Damian Lillard specifically, but I also want to take a look at this schedule in the month of March for the Bucks. We mentioned the challenges there in terms of the opponents. Really weird stretch too, where you have 2 sets of 2 days off sandwiched around 2 back-to-backs for the Bucks, and some opportunities to make some noise here for this Bucks team with the immediate schedule in front of them, I should say. So we'll get to that conversation coming up after this on Locked On Bucks. Well, time to talk to you about our friends over at DoorDash. All of us NBA fans, time to get ready. They swoosh, you save. Thanks to Dash Pass, every time a player scores 50 or more points in a game, you score a huge deal the next day. It's simple. When any player scores 50 or more in a game during the 2024-25 NBA regular season, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order, up to $10 off the next day from noon to midnight. Whether you're planning an epic game day feast after a 50-point performance, you can celebrate by ordering wings, pizza, or burgers from your favorite spot and get it delivered right to your door. Maybe you need lunch for the next day, a quick and easy lunch meal to have planned with Dash Pass. You get your favorite meals with $0 delivery fees and reduced service fees. Plus, now you save even more with that NBA exclusive offer. Sign up with Dash Pass and be ready to save. When any player scores 50 or more in a game, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order the next day, up to $10 off. Just use promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight after a 50-point game on eligible orders at participating merchants. Must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more. So, well, before we get to the schedule and March's schedule, the one thing to point out, I believe the Bucks have moved into 29th instead of 30th in fourth quarter offense.
Hey, now progress
after that Mavs game. This is not casting blame, but there's one thing to keep an eye on. Giannis, I believe, still leads the league in second half scoring. Damian Lillard isn't far behind. And if we just look at their scoring by halves and efficiencies, Dame has been pretty consistent first half to second half. He's a 37% three-point shooter for the Bucks this season. In the second half of games, he's a 39% shooter in the first half. But, I mean, I haven't broken this one down by quarter. It kind of shows you third quarter Damian Lillard is really pouring it on because he's shooting just 30% on threes in the fourth quarter. So wow. He's your leading scorer just barely in front of Giannis in the fourth quarter of games, but just 30% shooting from three. Like, that's the biggest number that has to change. Like, Dame has to be at least 36 or so percent shooter in the fourth. That's the thing that we keep coming back to in fourth quarters. And I've been asked, I'm sure you have too, several times, hey, why is the Bucks offense what it is in the fourth quarter? I don't have a great answer, but that part doesn't help. And it's maybe unfair and it may single Damian Lillard out, but you need Dame to be Dame time in those moments.
Yeah, because we spent so much time talking about how the ball needs to move, how guys need to be feeling involved and just moving the ball and having guys involved. But again, when it comes to the clutch, you're going to lean on your superstars. You're going to lean on Dame. You're going to lean on Giannis. So the two of them have to be performing. And to hear that Dame shooting 30% from three in the fourth quarter, surprising. Like, just to think about, like, okay, knowing what Dame is known for with Dame time and coming up clutch, like, that's something that you don't expect. And when Dame shoots it, any shot that he shoots, it has a chance of going in because Dame puts in that work. So that's definitely something to monitor for this team going forward. It's just that fourth quarter offense for them. Not even just necessarily the raw numbers, but just how they're looking to execute their sets and what they're trying to get into during that time. Because if teams are making an adjustment in the fourth quarter along the way of like, okay, we understand like now they're going to try to lean on Dame and Giannis even more. So now we're going to be doing X, Y, and Z. How can the Bucks respond to that? Because they're just going to need better production from Dame. And it might just come down as being as simple as make the shots. Like they have to just fall. Like the shot quality is good. They just have to fall. And that's the other part of basketball of just like, you got to trust your work and hopefully you can see that ball go into the hoop for them. So that's something to definitely keep an eye on as the season continues to wind down, their fourth quarter offense and just how the offense continues to move forward, because the Bucks are like 21-1 when they score over 120 points. Normally, if they can really get the offense going, they're going to have a really strong shot to win, especially with the way that they've been playing defense.
You know, it's funny. The Bucks are 29th in offense in the fourth quarter and 5th in defense. That part isn't funny, but the Pistons are 27th in offense and 4th in defense in the fourth quarter. So it's been a similar model for Detroit. They don't have a negative net rating. I mean, that's the thing that jumps out. As good as the Bucks defense has been in the fourth quarter, they have a -3 net rating in those moments. That is nowhere near good enough. Dame, by the way, is a 44% 3-point shooter in the third quarter of games for the Bucks this season. So he started to find his groove there in that quarter. And now you need it to carry through into the fourth quarter going forward. You got 16 games in the month of March. You've already played one of them against the Dallas Mavericks. And I believe it's an even 8-8 split home and road for the Bucks. But in the immediate future here, we pointed to, hey, March, especially right around the All-Star break, that's when it starts to get tough in terms of your schedule. The Bucks have an opportunity here because we mentioned the 2 days off that you have today and Monday, going into a back-to-back in Atlanta on Tuesday and then home against the Mavs on Wednesday, then 2 days off again, and then another back-to-back, and then you hit the meat of your schedule. But let's just take a look at what's in front of them right now. The Atlanta Hawks. Mm-hmm. Outside looking in the postseason mix, I mean, they're a play-in team, but a sub-500 team, and you have very few of those opponents left on the schedule. I'm not going to call anything a must-win, but be really nice to get this win when you look at the rest of the games that you have. Then you got the Mavs, night 2 of a back-to-back, but nothing's going to change in terms of personnel. Anthony Davis isn't going to be reevaluated until later in the week. I don't think Derek Lively or Daniel Gafford are going to be back for that game, so you should hold a sizable advantage there once again. And then you go into another back-to-back at home Saturday and Sunday, and that's the other part of this. The Bucks have 6 of their next 8 games at home. The road game against Atlanta, then 3 straight games at home, a big one we'll get to in a second in Indy, and then another 3-game homestand. That Magic game, though, they're going to be without Jalen Suggs, who doesn't sound great in terms of being out indefinitely and everything that he's been dealing with the back and the knee. So at least this week, you're going to catch teams that are either below 500 or shorthanded. And for how few of those you have remaining, those, regardless of whether or not it's a back-to-back, are incredibly important games.
Incredibly important. We already went over how it looked for this Bucks team coming out of the break last year and feeling like, man, they're really rolling. And then they just started losing some games where you're like, you shouldn't drop these games here, especially if you're trying to achieve what you're looking to. And again, yes, we know that teams, you go through stretches of ups and downs throughout the course of an 82-game season. Like, it's just going to happen. It's a long season. And that's what we heard from this Bucks team this year about starting 2-8 of like, teams go through these stretches. Ours just so happened to be at the very, very beginning of the season, which really tilts the conversation and how people are viewing our team. But heading into the play, like this stretch, I want to see them get those wins over the sub 500 teams. I want to see them continue to take care of business at home, because I believe the Bucks are a top 5 team at home when it comes to just their record playing on their home court. Continue that. And if the Bucks can also start to win more games on the road, because they have been the worst road team in the top 6 of the East this season. if they can really get that going too, when you see those games on the road for this team and they can start knocking some of those off too, I think it bodes really well for just the confidence level I will have in this team heading into the playoffs, because it's not going to be an easy road for this Bucks team, assuming that, they stay on that 4-5 line or they drop to 6 along the way. So like, if you can continue to build, and with that building, if you can be a top 4 seed because of how dominant you have been at home this season, it's going to bode so well for your chances to continue to advance. So I just really want to see this team start putting it together. Like, if you start getting those wins over some of the teams that you lost to earlier in the season, or games you would have lost last year, but you're able to turn it around this year, again, I think it bodes really well for them heading into the playoffs.
Yeah, so 16 games in March, and as we just mentioned, 3 right off the bat are going to be against teams that are dealing with some type of rather significant injury. 4 are against teams that are below 500. Hard to believe, at least as of right now, that includes the Phoenix Suns. So it's still challenging because of what waits for you at the back half. And you mentioned the road record, a 5-game Western Conference road trip, which has not treated the Bucks kindly. Road trips out west this year or last year. So there's a lot of challenges backloaded in the schedule, but you are getting some help in the early portion of the month. And the hope there is that can kind of, spring you forward and build some momentum there. So in those 16 games, is there for you hey, you got to win X amount of games? Is there a set number?
If next 16, the Bucks can go 10-6, I'd feel good about 11-5 would be like ideal of like, yeah, you are really starting to put together, try to get a win for 2 wins for every loss along the way. And like,
Yep.
you are really building momentum going forward. So I would ideally, let's go 11-5 for the next 16. And I'd be like, we are in really, really good shape going forward, but 10-6 wouldn't be mad at that either.
Yeah. 10-6 is where I kind of fell to. If they go 11-5, they're going to be 45-30 going into the stretch here, the final month of the season. And I mean, that has some half challenges in the month of April, because Phoenix may be out of the mix by the time you host them. And Mike Budenholzer makes his return to Milwaukee on April 1st. Philadelphia has already started to shut it down. Yeah, you got 2 games with the Pelicans, which we said at the time, hey, this is a benefit for the Bucks to kind of kick those down, or kick that 1 game down the road, and a Pelicans team that is going to pull the plug on the season. That leaves Timberwolves, who are probably going to need that game for seeding, but it's a home game. Maybe Miami needs the same, a chance to potentially catch the Pistons, or at least secure that 7-8 line. And then the 2 biggest games of the year. Can you believe we're saying this?
I can't.
The Detroit Pistons, final 2 games of the season. And I mean, there's a good chance those 2 games are going to be what decides who's either 4th or 5th or 6th.
And last season, we saw it come down to the last game of the season of trying to figure out where the seeding was going to lie in the Eastern Conference. And it might be the case again this season. And again, this type of stuff gets me excited about watching the game, of like, the competition level is high, the stakes that are on the line for these games. And knowing that these 2 Pistons games are the ones that end the year for this team, looking at the schedule initially, like, I was thinking like, oh man, like the Pistons games might be an easy way to end the season. And, Detroit's going to, or not Detroit, but New Orleans is going to be difficult down the stretch here, and the Suns and so, and the Philly. But as the season has played out, seeing that those games are flipped, and then the Detroit games have flipped too, like, that's the fun of playing through the season. All the predictions ahead of time, you don't know. So it's when you get on the hardwood and you play, you get to see it. So it's going to be important. So they're going to have to take care of business again against those teams that are spinning those wheels of like, we are not playing for much at this point anymore. Get those wins, because they're all going to count along the way. I think it's going to be another close battle determining the seeding in the East this year.
Yeah, I misspoke. There'll be 44-30 going into April with 8 games left there. But yeah, it's, again, we saw a 6-game win streak coming out of the break last year. You're 5-1 coming out of the break this year, 6-1 if we lump in that Timberwolves game, since it was an impressive win. So let's just continue to take those steps forward and build on what we've seen this group piecing together in terms of their habits, and especially that offensive number in their play on that side of the floor. One more day off before that game against the Atlanta Hawks. Bucks have been in Atlanta since just after the game against the Mavs. Doc Rivers still has family there, so eager to get to Atlanta and spend a couple of off days there in that city. And it's a Hawks team that, still, again, has something to play for here. They're still in the play-in tournament mix. And the big thing for any team in the play-in tournament right now, Atlanta is a game back in the loss column of the Magic. Get on that 7-8 line. So it gives you two cracks at getting into the postseason. We didn't even get to the personnel that we kind of tiptoed around and mentioned. So we'll save that for tomorrow's show, since I think that's a much lengthier discussion. What happens with Ryan Rollins? It's been a question asked by many people. What are the deadlines you need to be aware of? When are players eligible for postseason rosters? Like, have we passed that deadline? How does that work? We'll open up all of that discussion on our show coming up tomorrow. That'll do it for today, though. For Camille, I'm Justin. We will talk with you guys once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.